Hey everybody, it's Lyris. Today's video is going to be a bit different than my usuals, as I'm going to be diving into the basics on flanking. This will be a bit niche as it's designed to help players who are typically used to hanging out in the backline or with the rest of the team and may feel a bit intimidated to try and make more aggressive plays. But this video might also be helpful for people who already practice flanking but may need help polishing their technique. Regardless of your reasons, if you want to learn more about flanking, this video is for you. And if you like this content and want to see more of it, please make sure to like and subscribe to show your support. Alright, shameless plug over, let's get into it. I'll be breaking this down into three main categories: setup, timing, and rotation. I'll be using a couple of different characters to showcase my points and prove that these tips can be used on any character. Going forward, I'm going to assume that you're already well acquainted with your character and their abilities. That way I don't have to sit here and explain to you combos and things like that. If you're looking for videos like that, there are plenty of them online on other channels, but for the sake of this video, we're just going to be covering the basics of flanking. So essentially, any character is capable of flanking, although the ones that are going to have the easiest time doing so are going to be the ones with either movement or stun abilities. However, dive characters are going to have the easiest time flanking because they're kind of built for flanking. Typically, they're going to have two kinds of abilities: damage and movement or disengage abilities. For Daredevil, take notice of his deflect and his grapple. These are his two most important disengage abilities that will allow him to survive. So it will be extremely important to learn how to use them and when. In Psylocke's case, she has 2 dashes and a 2-second invisibility. Magik has her 2 portals and a dash, and Black Panther has his dashes and his spin dash. Depending on whatever character you're using, it will be especially important to manage these cooldowns specifically. Psylocke and Daredevil may have an easier time since these cooldowns aren't necessarily part of their damaging kit, whereas Magik and BP may have to be a bit more mindful since both use their escape abilities as damaging abilities as well. Now, with all of that in mind, let's start with step number 1, setting up. Playing a dive character or trying to flank with any character consists of following a rhythm. Each character will have their own rhythm, and this rhythm is determined by that character's cooldowns, like we talked about before. While setting up, take a moment to glance down at the bottom right corner of your screen and just take a peek at your cooldowns. Rivals is a very fast-paced game, so sometimes it can be difficult to remember to make sure you're prepared to go in before you go in. I know, all this talk about flanking, so what exactly is a flank? A flank is really any angle that you can get on the enemy team away from the main one, and that's gonna be where both teams will shoot at each other from. You'll oftentimes hear people call this main. Now, there are different kinds of flanks. If you take a look here at this angle, this would be considered an off angle. But if you take a look over here, this would be a much more aggressive flank, since you're entirely cut off from your team. This is where having an escape plan becomes extremely important. Let's face it, most of the time, especially as you climb through the ranks, you won't be able to assassinate someone without the enemy team noticing. So you need to have a plan in case things go awry. This will go into your setup planning. Ideally, you want to be in sight of a health pack or know where the nearest one is. It should not be difficult to get there. The easier it is to get to a health pack, the higher chance that you'll survive your encounter. Once you have secured that health pack or an easy route back to your healers, you can safely engage again once your cooldowns come back. I would also like to emphasize the importance of utilizing multiple different off angles and flanks. If you keep going for the same positions, the enemy team may start to catch on, so it's good to change it up before you get too predictable. And with that, your setup is complete. Congratulations, you are ready to flank. Keep in mind, these things should be happening within seconds, so as much as I've broken everything down, it shouldn't take very long in-game for you to set up. I found that once you really grasp the flow of a character, these things will happen very naturally. The next thing I'd like to briefly touch upon is something called uptime. The DPS role has a lot of uptime, and you may or may not have heard this term before. Uptime is, simply put, how long your character is in the fight shooting and dealing damage. Your uptime will last for however long you are dealing damage and have cooldowns. When you don't have cooldowns or health, this is your downtime, where you retreat, regroup with your team, get a health pack, and find a good time to go in again. Generally speaking, if there are people in front of you, you want to be shooting and applying pressure. This goes double for Magic or Psylocke, since Magic has the health to brawl with her frontline, and Psylocke gets her cooldown shortened the more she hits her primary fire. However, with characters like Daredevil who don't do too well with brawling, you'll want to constantly be going into their backline or finding your next spot. During your downtime, it's very important to stay safe and passive. Don't go for any aggressive plays. Now is the time to either stay with your team or stay somewhere hidden while you wait for your cooldowns. Alright, now that you have all of this in mind, is it finally time to go in? Well, this is what you need to be asking yourself before every single engagement. Picture this. You've set up, you've got your cooldowns, you're all ready to move in for the kill, and then the entire enemy team turns around and focuses you and you get murked, leaving your team to fight a 5v6 without your useless ass. Next thing you know, you're sitting 0-5 being called a Zaza, bringing 0 value aside from feeding the enemy team's ultimates. Your team gets tilted, you get tilted, and they tell you to swap, and it all could have been avoided if you had just timed your engagements properly. So what exactly does this mean? Well, it means a lot. There are a few things to consider when asking yourself when to engage. First is the enemy's positioning, as well as your team's positioning. Typically you want to wait until the team fight actually begins and the enemy healers have committed some cooldowns that would enable them to survive their encounter with you. This requires a little patience. I know, it is a very foreign concept to picture the idea that we might need to wait a second to go in. But this is a very important step in the process. If you go in before the enemy team has used any cooldowns, then it's an even playing field. At that point, you're just banking on the enemy being worse than you, and you will not like those odds. Instead, go in when you have the advantage in the situation. Sometimes you'll get lucky and have a dive comp to work with. At that point, you can go in whenever your other diver goes in, like if you have a Cap or a Venom. Capitalize on their engagements and fight with them. Right here you can see me set up with my Venom, where we then cook their backline. But you don't have to do this with another diver. Let's say your other DPS is a Moon Knight. Wait until you hear him throw his Ankh. Chances are the enemy team will get all frazzled trying to destroy the Ankh and focus Moon Knight. Dagger may throw down her bubble and use her shade. Loki might pop his lamps. Once those cooldowns have been exhausted, that's then your cue to move in and capitalize. As you do, take note of the rest of the playing field. I want you to think of the enemy team kind of like a swimming pool. They like to stay in somewhat of a grouped, almost circular formation. If you dive into the middle right in front of the enemy's faces, they'll all converge on you. Who's in the middle? And unless you have an escape tool or the enemy team has wasted their CC abilities, chances are you're going to get jumped. Instead, try jumping in from behind the enemy team. In this scenario, it forces them to turn around and look at you. Even if all 6 of them turn to look at you, it means they've turned their back on your entire team, who are now free to wail on them and make space. In such a situation, that's your time to leave. Even if you didn't get a kill, your value came from simply forcing the supports to turn around, and if you survive, you get to go back and do it again. Please bear in mind that your #1 goal on the flank is to get the enemy healer's attention. Even if they sit there spamming heals at one another, not allowing you to get a kill, it means they've taken their attention off the whole rest of their team, which means your team gets to capitalize. If you stay too long and try to force the kill, it's more than likely you're going to die, leaving your team in a 5v6. Rivals boils down to a numbers game. In its simplest form, you're always trying to ensure that you have the advantage, whether that be teammates, cooldowns, ultimates, whatever it is. Anything that threatens that advantage, that's your cue to back out so you don't lose it. There are times, however, when the trade-off is worth your life. If you have the opportunity to kill 2 supports and manage to succeed in even taking down 1, the trade-off is huge. I think we can all agree that the support's life is the most valuable on any team. If they die, the team will probably die with them. So trading the life of a DPS for a support is well worth it. However, it is only worth it if you know you can secure the kill. Otherwise, just get out and regroup. After a couple of these rotations, chances are you've probably built up your ultimate. For this ultimate, you are going to apply the exact same principles as your flanks. You want the element of surprise. Please do not W key into the enemy thinking you can take on the world. They will see this coming and react accordingly. Like this rocket here. Watch me walking directly at him and responded with an ult, where his team then immediately jumped on me. Instead, the name of the game becomes baiting out enemy cooldowns and ultimates. If I'm playing someone like Psylocke, there's no way I'm killing anything through a healer ultimate like Cloak and Dagger, Rocket, Luna, or any other strong sustain ult. But if I'm epic and cool and I'm playing Magic, I might be able to hit the one-shot combo with my ultimate. If you're not as confident or you're not playing Magic, the best way to ult as a flanker is to either wait for these cooldowns or ultimates to be used, or to bait them out yourself. It requires a lot of patience, but once you're ready to go in, jump on their heads by surprise and assassinate them. Now, sometimes you're going to have a very hard time with this, especially right now as triple support has taken over the meta. It has become extremely difficult to play dive heroes, but it is not impossible. The best way to do this is by always looking for isolated targets, or even using your ultimate to bait out enemy support ultimates. As frustrating as it can be to have to trade your ult for nothing more than another support ultimate, it can sometimes be extremely valuable, especially if you know the other supports don't have theirs, and maybe your other DPS has one coming up. It's important to always be taking into account what ways you can bring value to your team. After all, you are the only factor in the entire lobby that you can control. You can't control the characters your team plays or the decisions they make, but you can control the characters you play and the decisions you make. So you should always be asking yourself, how can I help the team, as opposed to, how can I get a kill? Now, time for a little harsh truth for a second. People who tend to lean toward these really fun, flanky characters tend to also have the biggest egos. And that's because they have some of the highest potential to carry games and get lots of kills. But on the flip side, they also have the highest potential to sell games and get no kills. This is where you have to accept one truth. You will not always have the best stats on your team. Sometimes your value isn't going to be visible on the scoreboard with high kills or damage. Sometimes the best thing you can do is make space, cap the point, or help your healers with divers. People, especially in the Rivals community, like to put a lot of stock into the numbers on the scoreboard, but it really doesn't show everything. In this game specifically, I had a few ultimates where I only got 1 or even 0 kills, but because I timed it well enough, it forced the enemy team backwards so my team could move in. With that, I'm going to finish off with my final point. Healing. We all know the DPS that charges into the enemy backline and pings for heals a million times while they're already a corpse on the ground. Don't be this guy. So long as you follow all of these tips, you shouldn't be. However, piggybacking off of my previous tip about giving your team the advantage, do the same for your healers. If your healers are consistently having trouble hitting you, try retreating behind a wall nearby and standing still. Some healers like Loki or Luna might be difficult to aim with, especially if you're playing a flying character or a character that moves very fast. Take a moment to just make their lives a little easier sometimes and be patient. If it's repeatedly a problem, consider trying to be more self-sufficient by playing off health packs instead. This means one less person for your healers to keep track of, and you don't have to get angry and yell at them for not healing you. That concludes this video on flanking. If you found any of this advice helpful, make sure you give the video a like and even subscribe to the channel. I post funny Rivals content here and there, and I wouldn't mind doing more guides like this in the future if you guys like it. Good luck on those rank up matches.